So you woke up this morning and you thought to yourself, how am I going to survive if I don't hear Jay Valeur from Eventyr Games tell me what to think about the new cleric we just got in the 1D&D UA? And you're in luck because that's exactly what I'm going to be doing now. I'm going to go over the new playtest cleric and we're going to compare it to the cleric that we have in 5e. So there's D&D Beyond here on the left side and the new playtest document here on the right side. Now I'm not going to spend time on the flavor text. You can read that on your own time. The creating a cleric section is not too interesting for me either, but the class feature table is of course very interesting. So as we can see, there is a switch around where the channel divinity has been moved up to level 1 instead of level 2. We have the divine domain, or now called cleric subclass, going from level 1 to level 3, and there's no subclass feature at level 2 either. And then we have something called holy order right here at second level instead. And beyond that, it looks mostly similar, except that Destroy Undead is now called Smite Undead. We have Channel Divinity is not written in anymore, and we'll find out why soon. Then we have Blessed Strikes at level 7. There's nothing here. There's instead a Divine Domain feature at level 6. And then we have Holy Order again at level 9, which was otherwise an empty level. And then we have Divine Intervention at level 11. The subclass feature comes in at level 10. And Destroy Undead doesn't scale on the class feature list anymore. And as before, the subclass features are coming in at 3rd, 6th, 10th, and 14th level. Then Greater Divine Intervention is at level 18 instead of level 20. And we have that Epic Boon coming in at level 20 instead. And that sums up the overall changes in the cleric's class level progression. Moving on, we have the creating a cleric section where we have the hit points, proficiencies, armor training, light armor, starting equipment, all that stuff. Beyond some extra stuff written, I think, for the starting equipment. Yeah, there's some changes there, but everything else remains exactly the same. So no surprises here, no changes at all. This is all the same. Where we do have some significant changes is with the new channel divinity. And we can see here that channel divinity is sort of the same flavor as before, where you pick up your holy symbol and you take an action to do something, but now it's been moved to being a proficiency bonus per day or per long rest amount of uses, and it still uses spellcasting, saving throw, and so on. So they're moving away from giving the cleric more uses of channel divinity gradually as it levels up. If we look down here, before you had 1 use per short rest, and at 6th level, you'll get twice between short rests, and then at 18th level, you'll get it 3 times between short rests. Now it's just proficiency bonus per long rest. Now my issue with this is, as I've spoken about before, that changing everything to proficiency bonus per long rest, which is a smooth and clean system, it's easy to keep track of, it also makes a first level cleric dip a lot more enticing. The same goes for the ranger and the bard and stuff like that, where many of the early level, the first level, second level abilities scaled with proficiency bonus, and I'm not sure that it's really great for multi-classing balancing. It's going to be very hard to balance these things. And that's also because the channel divinity that the cleric now gets is a lot more useful at first or second level, as it was before, than the old one, because we get this feature called Divine Spark as a magic action, and that's just an action where you do magic. You point your holy symbol at another creature, and you can either heal that creature equal to, again, proficiency bonus, and add the roll together, or you can have the creature make a constitution saving throw, and you deal damage equal to that amount instead. So 2 times per long rest, you can either heal for 2d8 or deal up to 2d8 damage with this holy symbol, divine channel divinity thing, Divine Spark. And the issue here, again, is just having a single level of cleric for whatever purpose. Then this is just going to scale. It's going to be great moving forward. It's a good heal. I actually like the ability. That said, I think it's nice that the cleric has some built-in heal, and Turn Undead was a very situational feature that you wouldn't always get to use. So having something that is really always useful, this is never not going to be useful. That's a great thing for the cleric. I like it a lot. I'm just not sure that it should scale with proficiency bonus, because the 1 level dipping is going to be maybe an issue. We have yet to see if they're going to change how multiclassing works exactly. Are they going to address some of this stuff later on? But as a concept, I like Divine Spark. I think it's not necessarily most exciting stuff. It's just healing or dealing damage, but it is going to be useful for the cleric, and that's fine, I think. Moving on, we have Turn Undead, which the cleric also had before. It works mostly in the same way, except that now we have this dazed condition that an undead creature that fails the saving throw against it is going to be affected by. And the dazed condition is a new condition that basically means that you can't take bonus action and reactions, and you can only take an action or a move on your turn. So you're basically restricted to moving or taking an action. And that is a really nice condition. I love that they're putting that condition in there. We're working with a condition of our own in our stuff, so that's great. In addition to that, we're told that the creature can only take the dash action, and if it moves, it must end that move farther from you than where it started. That's kind of weird, because if you can only take an action or a move action, then you can take the dash action, but you can't actually move. So basically, the undead creature can only move. It also states that it must end that move farther from you than where it started, which is a funny way of saying it can't get closer to you, because technically the undead creature would be able to run up to you 15 feet and then run back 15 feet, for example. So I'm not too sure about the wording here, but the intention is pretty clear. The undead creature is only going to be able to either stand still or move away from you. That's it. And that's basically what Turn Undead did before, except that now it can't even take the dodge action as it could before. Next up, we have spellcasting, which once again works probably just about the same. There are some differences here, and the major difference is the same we saw with the Bard and the Ranger, and that is that clerics must now prepare spells directly, or prepare spells directly for the spell slot that they have. Then we have Holy Order, which is a new feature that the cleric gets at 2nd level, and this feature is basically giving the cleric the opportunity to choose between 3 different options. The first option is a protection option, which gives you martial weapon proficiency and heavy armor training, which is going to be great for any cleric that wants to get that martial training. It's something that was baked into a lot of subclasses before for the cleric, and something that people would pick up at 1st level, especially with multiclassing, because that heavy armor proficiency is really, really great. Now it's put into this Holy Order thing. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap if you're going to try to use an old subclass that had that heavy armor training proficiency. You're now going to get it from 2 places, but the good thing they've done here is to say you can pick something else, so you're not necessarily going to get something that is superfluous because things aren't aligning. So that's actually a good example of how I think Wizards of the Coast are doing a decent job sometimes of making it backwards compatible. The other options you can choose is the Scholar, where you get proficiency in 2 of the following skills, and then you can add your Wisdom modifier to the ability check or skill check. And that is actually a new thing. I don't think we've seen that before. I kind of like it. It's like expertise in a way. It's probably going to be better in the early game, and then of course obviously going to end up worse because you're going to have that +6 proficiency, but there's not a lot of games that get to that, like where you have a +6 proficiency. So I think this is overall better, which is also kind of an issue because we were told that the experts were going to be the expertise classes, and now we have the cleric being able to pick up a limited selection, of course, of skills. They're going to be even better probably than the experts at 2nd level. That said, it is not the most useful skills overall. Arcana, History, Nature, Persuasion, and Religion are not going to be the spells that are going to really make a huge difference mechanically, but it is very useful to be able to be the party's face with a Wisdom modifier to Persuasion, or know a lot of Religion. That just makes sense that you're not just relying on intelligence. So I actually kind of like this feature. I think it does step a bit on the toes on the experts, but still you're not going to be able to pick up stealth or athletics or acrobatics or sleight of hand or any one of those skills that are maybe going to make a difference mechanically in combat. Persuasion is the only one that really stands out, and I think it's nice that clerics are going to be able to be persuasive, because that is a trope you wouldn't necessarily, or you would maybe think that priest would fit into. So yeah, I'm not hating it. I think it's a fun way to do it. Then we have the Torma Thurge, which just allows you to get an extra cantrip from the Divine spell list, and you regain 1 expended use of your Channel Divinity whenever you finished a short rest, so more Channel Divinities. Really great feature as well. I actually think that they've done a very decent job of balancing these 3 options with each other. So the Scholar option is obviously going to be great if you want to be the party's face, you want to get that religion. The Torment Thurge is going to be great if you're more into the spellcasting aspect of the cleric. You're going to get that extra cantrip. Not that there's that many great cantrips to choose from necessarily, but you're going to get that extra cantrip and that extra Channel Divinity now that your Channel Divinity is actually good. That is also really, really strong, I think. And then we have Holy Order heavy armor training, martial weapon proficiency, those are always going to be great for characters that want to get into melee or just have a higher AC. So I really like the Holy Order feature. I think it makes sense, and yeah, it fits in well at second level. You're still going to maybe see some dips to get that heavy armor training because it's very good, but the cleric doesn't get anything else at second level, so it's not like you're giving a lot away. But a 2-level dip to cleric, I could see that for some characters where you're going to get that channel divinity and then you're picking up heavy armor training as well. That could really work well with some multi-class combinations. Next up, we have the Cleric subclass, and there's not a lot to say about that. That's the same as before. The more interesting thing comes down here at Smite Undead, where before we would have Destroy Undead. So let's just find that, Destroy Undead. Before, Destroy Undead would just go in and straight up destroy undead creatures under a certain CR if they failed the saving throw. Now it is instead something where you deal a number of damage to that creature instead. So you still turn the creature, it still becomes basically able to only move, and then you also deal a number of d8 equal to a proficiency bonus, again, so scaling with proficiency, and you deal radiant damage equal to that amount to the creature, to the undead creature. No matter its challenge rating, no matter anything like that, and that's fine, because before it was often where you'd use Destroy Undead or Turn Undead, and then, whoa, it's 1 CR, okay, then it doesn't work, and these were pretty low. There's not a whole lot of, like, okay, you could wipe out zombies, but zombies when you're 5th level or 8th level are not going to be a huge issue anyway. So I like that they've kind of done it this way instead. Going further down this, we have Blessed Strikes, and this is something that used to be baked into the subclasses for the clerics, where they would either give you a plus 1d8 radiance damage when you hit with a weapon once per turn, or when you hit with a cantrip. And now what they've done is they've actually taken that feature out of the subclasses and put it into the Cleric's core class at level 7. So at level 7 you just get a buff to your damage or to your weapon attacks. Now I'm kind of split on this because it's just straight damage again. So just like your Turn Undead feature, Divine Spark, it's just more radiant damage you deal. And I'm not necessarily sure why the Cleric should be able to deal this damage. The melee damage thing is not gonna be great unless you have a very specific multi-class martial build. My issue with Blessed Strikes is also that this isn't really backwards compatible a whole lot, I would say, because now if you take the Arcane Initiate or whatever it's called, Arcana Domain, you get potent spellcasting at level 8 or wherever that is for, that would be 10th level, I think. And you then add your wisdom and your 1d8, and that may be intentional. It's not game breaking or anything, but it's still sort of overlapping. If you take the death domain, you have that divine strike where you deal an extra 1d8 necrotic damage and 2d8 at 14 level, and that stacks with that 1d8. Again, is it game breaking? No, but it just kind of feels superfluous, like they're taking something out of the subclasses, putting it in the core class. That's obviously going to mean you're going to get two nearly identical features, and that's not necessarily fun or probably balanced either. So this is not a good example of making stuff that is backwards compatible, as I think we saw with the Holy Order and stuff like that. Anyway, moving on, at 9th level you get another Holy Order, which I think is not the most inventive. At least not when we only have 3 options. Then I would probably want 5 options or something, because you can very quickly run out of options. And I think players like choosing what they get for features like this. So yeah, not the most imaginative to just give another Holy Order feature. Then at level 11 we have Divine Intervention, and we should just go find that up here in the top again. Yeah, Divine Intervention. Yeah, so Divine Intervention is actually mostly unchanged. You use an action, you roll a percentile die. If that's lower than your cleric level or equal to it, your deity intervenes, and the DM chooses the nature of the intervention, and a divine spell would be appropriate. And you can't use it again for 2d6 days instead of 7, but that's the same average. And you can use it again after long rest if it doesn't succeed, if you don't get that divine intervention. Now, my issue with this is still the same as it was before. It's a DM decided thing. And that's actually funny, because we just saw a Crawford interview where Crawford said we're moving away from stuff that needs the DM to buy in on it. Like, we're moving away from the ranger having natural explorer for a specific environment or favorite foe for a specific creature that you're not gonna run into, so that feature isn't useful anymore. Or we're gonna move away from the wild magic sorcerer being only able to get their wild magic thing going if the DM gives it to them. And now we're working with Divine Intervention, which again just requires your DM to come up with something. And I'm not saying that this feature is necessarily wrong, but it's going to have the same issue as it had before, where in some games with some DMs it's going to be awesome, in other games with other DMs it's maybe not going to be awesome. Is there a real easy fix for it that doesn't make it just a boring, you can cast a spell that you don't know or something? I don't know, but I don't think it's necessarily the best feature to just leave as it is, because I'm not sure that it worked as intended before. So there's that. And then moving on, we have at 18 level Greater Divine Intervention. When you use the Divine Intervention feature, it succeeds automatically, no rule required, and you can use it again after 2 to 4 days. So getting that 2 levels earlier is of course great. Not a lot of people are going to get to 18 level anyway. 20 at 18 doesn't make a huge difference, I think. And then we have that epic boon that the other subclasses or the other classes are also going to get at that 20 level. Now, prepared Cleric spell list is recommendations for which spells to prepare, and we can see that some of the spells have been changed. Those are underlined here, so Spiritual Weapon, Guidance, and Aid, and Banishment, and Resistance have been changed. We could go check those out. I think that'll be fine, because they're going to tell us a lot about the Cleric's overall balance. I think Cleric has always had an issue with not being powerful enough compared to other spellcasters like wizards and maybe druids and stuff like that at higher levels. So once you get those 5th level, 6th level, 9th level spells, the cleric is not going to have as many good options as a wizard would. Does that mean that the cleric is underpowered? I don't think so. I think it's still better than most straight martial characters, but it is not, in my opinion, as good at higher levels as a wizard would be. And I think changing spells, how they work, stuff like that, adding spells to the cleric spell list would really fix that, if you want to fix that. Maybe the solution is more to pull the wizard down to the cleric level, because the cleric was more balanced, I think. All right, moving on, we have cleric subclasses, and we're only going to get the one here, and that's the life domain subclass. So I'll just scroll down and find life here. Yep. And just like before, we get domain spells, but we don't get heavy armor proficiency. That was one of the reasons you'd pick up a life cleric before, to get that heavy armor proficiency at 1st level. That's not going to be an option now. Instead, you're just going to get straight to domain spells at 3rd level. And the domain spells are more or less the same. We get Lesser Restoration and Prayer of Healing. And the reason we're not getting Blessing Cure Wounds is because we're not getting it at 1st level anymore. So yeah, Lesser Restoration and Spiritual Weapon were the options before. Now it's Prayer of Healing and Lesser Restoration. Mass Healing Word and Revivify here. So instead of Beacon of Hope, we get Mass Healing Word. I don't think people are going to mind. And then we have at 7th level Death Ward and Guardian of Faith, which has been replaced with Aura of Life and Death Ward. So that makes sense as well. And then we have Mass Cure Wounds and Raise Dead, which has been replaced with Greater Restoration and Mass Cure Wounds, which again, I also think is going to be fine for people. I think people are going to be fine with this list. There's some changes where Spiritual Weapon and Guardian of Faith were obviously spells you would want to have just on your cleric straight up always, but you can still just prepare those. So the spells you're getting instead are not bad. Then you have a Disciple of Life. As far as I can tell, this is more or less the same. You heal additional hit points equal to 2 plus the spell's level. This was kind of boring before. I think it's good in as far as healing can be good in 5e Dungeons & Dragons, because it's not great to heal in combat. Out of combat, this is of course going to be very effective. And when you pull out that Mass Healing Word, which is a 3rd level spell, and you're going to heal an additional 5 hit points to each creature, that's really going to make a difference. In so far as you want to use healing in combat, that's what you want to spend your actions and spell slots on. Preserve Life is the channel divinity you get, where you can use an action and you restore number of hit points equal to 5 times your cleric level. That seems to be the same. Choose any creature, but don't divide those hit points among them. That is also the same. So this is basically the same, except that we don't have the sentence you can't use this feature on an undead construct. I think that could be because they're just going to write it into those monsters that they can't benefit from healing. I would not be surprised to see that, because it always sucks to have to say that in every spell that heals or stuff like that, where you could just like have that be a standard thing for undead in contract. They can't receive magical healing. It makes sense. Then we have Blessed Healer, where when you heal someone, you heal it yourself as well. That also seems to be the same. Now just getting it at 10th level instead of 6th. So that's obviously worse, I think. And then you have Supreme Healing, when you would normally roll 1 or more dice to restore hit points to creature. You don't roll, you just use the maximum. And getting that at 14 level is actually significant, because there's a lot more games that get to 14 level, I think, than 17 level, and it is a really strong feature. I think that is gonna make healing really worth it. So if you know you're always gonna heal the maximum, that is a huge difference. That's a plus 50%, 100% increase in actual healing output. So overall, not a lot of changes to the life domain Cleric. It's more or less the same, and I think it was pretty bland to begin with. But if you want to play that super healer, then it's going to be the subclass for you, basically. That's it. So finishing up, I just wanted to take a quick look at the new Cleric spells, or the redone Cleric spells, I should say. The first spell we have is 8, which before would give you a duration of 8 hours, and then you would increase a target's up to 3 creatures, target hit point maximum, and current hit points by 5. So you just give everyone 5 hit points, 5 maximum hit points for duration. Now you get 6 creatures you can choose, but the target only gain 5 temporary hit points. That, for me, makes the spell essentially almost useless. I don't know. Useless is probably a hard word, because it has a duration. There's no concentration on it. There's nothing like that. But having your hit point maximum and current hit points increased by 5 is a lot better than having 5 temporary hit points. And that's mostly because there's a lot of stuff that give you temporary hit points. There's a lot of features that give you temporary hit points. And a lot of those features and a lot of those action stuff like that are not going to cost you a second level spell slot. I don't think 8 was a super powerful spell before, and I think it's gotten less powerful now. So yeah, that's a nerf to the 8 spell, and it might be a deserved nerf, but it's not necessarily a fun nerf, I'd say. Banishment has been changed, and I've actually gone in and looked through it already, so I can tell you that it seems to be more or less the same, except that it now gets a saving throw at the end of each of its turns to come back. And that's great, because before, if you could concentrate on banishment, you could just take someone out of the fight for a minute and then gang up on that creature when it came back. Now it works a bit differently, where they're going to have a lot bigger chance to get back before it ends. The spell has obviously gotten worse. It's not as good as it was before, and I think that's nice, because banishment was a save or suck spell, essentially, where you could just yeet someone out of the game when you used it. So I think it's nice that it's been reined in a bit. There's a per round saving throw. Still not the most fun spell to just be banished to a harmless demi-plane and rolling each turn. But it's less problematic now. So another interesting thing we get is the guidance spell, and I'm just going to pull up the guidance spell we got in the last UA, because we also got a new guidance spell there. And if we look at that, the last rendition we got was reaction when an ally within 30 feet of you fail an ability check, and you can have the creature roll a d4 and add the number check, but you can only do it once per long rest. Now, the new guidance, or the second revision of the guidance spell, is going to be a reaction when you are within 10 feet of an ally, and you give them that d4 to the ability check, and there's no caveat here for how often they can use it. So I thought, and I believe, that this change they made last time, once per long rest, made guidance basically useless. That's so little extra aid. Not useless, but very weak compared to, of course, as it was before, where it was a touch and concentration, which just meant you had to spam it all the time. That really sucked. So now it's more smooth. The 10 feet within you thing is not going to matter a whole lot. The issue I always had with guidance was when he tries to open the door, I'll cast guidance. You're still going to have that. You're still going to have the cleric just going to stand next to whoever's making skill checks, standing next to you when you are making your knowledge checks, or standing next to you when you're making your persuasion checks, and constantly using guidance. And that said, you could already use the help action to give advantage, but you can actually stack this with advantage. So I think this rendition of guidance is better in practice, in play, than the old guidance, but it's still very, very powerful, even if it only has a range of 10 feet. I don't know what the fix to guidance is. I don't know exactly how we're going to make it so that it's not a must-have spell, that it's just going to be spammed over and over and over and over. So yeah, we're getting better. We're moving in the right direction, but I'm not necessarily sure that this is the version of guidance that I would want in my game. Moving on, we have Prayer of Healing, which was before a 2nd level spell with a casting time of 10 minutes, and 6 creatures would regain 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier hit points. And now it is, well, the same. You have a casting time of 10 minutes, and you choose a number of creatures equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. So not 6 creatures anymore, but actually less, and each of those creatures who remain within the range for the spell's entire casting gain the benefits of a short rest. That is very significant, and also regains 2d8 hit points, and a creature can't be affected by a spell again until the creature finishes a long rest. Important stuff to have in there, because if warlocks are going to work the same as they did before, you could multiclass a cleric and a warlock maybe, and then get your spell slots back on short rest, and you could really spam that. How it's worded here is an additional short rest, which can be really significant, especially in games like mine, where I limit short rest to 2 per day. You can't take more than 2 short rests in a day. And you also give 2d8 hit points to the creatures. So interesting, something that really has the potential to be abused. There may be some use cases where getting an additional short rest in 10 minutes is going to be really significant. It's obviously a lot better than it was before. Prayer of Healing before wasn't, for me, very impressive. So yeah, it's been changed. It's interesting to see how that'll play together with the rest of the stuff we're going to get in the playtest documents. Moving on, we have Resistance, which was before something like Guidance, where you had an action, duration of 1 minute, concentration to touch a willing creature, and then they can add a d4 to a saving throw of his choice. So before Resistance was touch one willing creature. Once before the spell ends, the target can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to one saving throw of his choice. It can roll the die before or after making the saving throw. So basically Guidance for saving throws. Now we have Resistance, where it is a reaction, just as before, 10 feet of you, and then you just add that d4 to the save. This makes Resistance really great, and it's also respond to you or an ally. So you can basically just have this cantrip, and you can use the reaction to give yourself a d4 to any saving throw you make, or an ally within 10 feet of you. I think it's actually too strong when you can use it on yourself, but if you could use it only on an ally, then I think it would be fine, because it has that 10 feet range on it, which means that you have to stay really close, and saving throws, unlike ability checks, is not something where you can necessarily predict when you're going to have to make a saving throw. So it means that if you're in that situation, a character within 10 feet of you fails a saving throw, you're going to be happy you have Resistance, and Resistance is going to be nice. So I like that change. I like it a lot. Right next to it, we have Spiritual Weapon. I've read through this. Nothing has changed, essentially, except that it is now a concentration spell. Spiritual Weapon wasn't a concentration spell before, which meant that every cleric and their mother had a spiritual weapon on their spell list because it was just necessary. This is a huge nerf to spiritual weapon. I can't understate how big of a nerf it is. It's probably going to make it so that instead of being on every cleric spell list and always prepared spell, this is going to be a very limited use prepared spell. I don't see a lot of clerics picking this up necessarily now that it is a concentration spell. Should it always have been a concentration spell? Probably. So for me it's fine, but it is certainly a lot less useful now. Probably still decent at lower levels, but at higher levels it really falls off quickly, I think. So overall, I don't think too much has changed with the cleric. I like some of the changes. There are other changes that I'm not necessarily super excited about, especially the ability to dip at earlier levels is probably problematic, I'd say. Some of the spell changes still need some fine-tuning, but overall I think they're doing a great job at actually fine-tuning the cleric. I think they're going in and doing some stuff. I'm not necessarily at a point where I think they've done what I would like them to do. We have that Divine Intervention still. We have still some spells that are maybe iffy, or subclasses that are not too interesting. A cleric core kit that is not too interesting, and I probably would have liked them to do a bit more, make it a bit more different, more interesting. But as far as it goes, I'm not decidedly unhappy with any of these changes. I think it's pretty, not underwhelming, just whelming, basically. I'm whelmed. It's fine. Not a huge improvement or a huge nerf as far as I see it. Some quality of life improvements, definitely. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below, and subscribe to the channel while you're down there. And now that we're speaking of clerics, we also have a new book, Heretic's Guide to Devotion and Divinity, which is maybe still on Kickstarter when this video come out, because it is the very last day you're able to pledge on it. If it's already wrapped up, you can still use the link in the description down below to find out where you can pre-order Heretic's Guide to Devotion and Divinity, which is going to come out in this spring of 2023. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.